Hello and welcome to That's Odd. I'm Nadia Giordana and we have a fun show for you today. It's all about UFOs, or if you want to call them UAPs, whatever you like to call them. It's going to be a fun subject and we're going to delve into it deeply. Lynn Garthwaite is my cohort here today. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Nadia. This is going to be interesting, and I understand you are going to start with an interesting story.
I do. There was a story, and it was it's titled "The Rendlesham Forest Incident," and that story had an impact on me because it's so different from some of the others that it really made me think about what this subject is and what's really out there. It was in England. The Rendlesham Forest is in England, right near an American Air Force base, I believe it was. Two men, Jim Penniston and John Burroughs, were the two young men who were sent out there to explore a downed craft. Turned out to be a landed spacecraft. And long story short, they were right there by the craft. Penniston reaches over and touches hieroglyphs on the craft. He immediately sees a flash of white light and gets a download into his brain, all ones and zeros, which is binary code.
Right.
I don't think he even knew that at the time.
Right.
After the fact, he wrote down from memory all those things and kept the notebook for 35 years. They didn't even try to interpret it or report that notebook until recently. And recently they did, and it was English, and essentially us from the future coming back to visit and warning the society, whatever the message was. It was short and simple. So that sure makes you think.
Right. And yeah, the whole binary code thing, nobody at that time knew what this was about.
I don't think so.
It was something that some advanced society obviously had some knowledge of. So
Yeah.
I remember reading about that too. That was absolutely fascinating. And, you know, things seem to always kind of come back to Area 51 in some relationship with that. And what I've thought about is that, you know, there's so many conspiracy theories with regard to Area 51. But I heard a explanation once that really resounded with me, that made me think this might be the real explanation, and that was that at that time, the reason there was such a robust cover-up is that they were covering up our own technology. And at the time, they were starting the whole research into stealth technology. And of course, they'd want to cover that up and keep it from our enemies. And you remember there was a lot of debris that was found, and one citizen there had said he had found some kind of aluminum foil type thing, but it didn't react like it. He'd squish it together, it bounced right back. He said, you know, we've never seen anything like that.
Is that from the Roswell incident?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so, but now we know that that kind of describes the skin that they put on an aircraft to attain that stealth technology, or what, you know, keeps radar from detecting it. And so the explanation there was that it was really our own technology that we were trying to cover up at the time. However, that explanation makes perfect sense for the cover-up way back then, because we wouldn't want that knowledge to get in the hands of our own enemies. It doesn't make much sense why there would continue to be a cover-up, because now the whole world knows we have stealth bombers, and many other countries have this similar technology. So there's no reason to continue to cover it up, and that's kind of where the big shrug happens.
I kind of think that was true, and now it's a smokescreen, and anything they're covering up is somewhere else.
There you go. We were lucky enough to have an interview with somebody who had kind of a close encounter with Area 51, so to speak. Dr. Amy Jauman was the subject of her interview. She's a speaker, she's an author, she's a program director and an assistant professor at St. Mary's University in Minnesota, and she's the one who had this close encounter at Area 51. It was an interesting interview, so take a look.
All right. Well, we are here with Dr. Amy Jauman. Dr. Jauman, can I call you Amy?
Yes, that'd be lovely.
All right, thank you. We're on the subject of aliens and UFOs and things like that, and you did something really interesting. You ran your first marathon, and you chose the extraterrestrial highway that skims along Area 51 for your first marathon. Now, how did that happen?
Yeah, so I am not what most people would consider a serious athlete, which is a little strange coming from someone who decides to run a marathon. But here we were in the middle of a pandemic, and I wanted to take the opportunity that I had working from home and not being able to do yoga classes, group fitness, kind of things, to tackle something that I'd always had a goal of doing. But the challenge was marathoners in general are pretty serious athletes, right? So I didn't want to get involved in a marathon where there'd be a lot of super competitive people that were, really geared. I was kind of looking for something a little bit lighter, which is surprisingly hard to find, a hard balance to strike. So in any case, I was searching and I saw the ET Full Moon Marathon, and I started reading about it. I saw the costumes that people wore because people run in silver tutus and just full. There's a costume contest, and I thought, these do not seem like super serious people. I think this will work very well. And sure enough, it was they had a variety of distances. So there were people that did a 5 or a 10K. And then people like me that I actually ran the ultra marathon. So it was 32 miles. So a little bit further than the regular marathon length, and had a lot of fun doing it. So
seriously, your first marathon and you went that extra mile, so to speak.
I did the extra 6 miles, as it were,
Yes.
But it was an area, they call it the Area 51K, right? So they played off of 51 and made it a 51K instead of the traditional.
Gotcha. So
distance.
I already knew you were a little bit crazy. Now I know you're a lot not crazy, but okay,
I accept.
Tell me the truth though. Did you leave the starting line and then get inhaled up into a spaceship and drop back off just before the end line? And then, but you were sweaty because on the spaceship, of course, they were chasing you around trying to, scope your insides, whatever.
Yeah.
That what really happened?
Yeah, that would make sense, because if I was being chased around, my Garmin would still be tracking a lot of miles, so it would still look like I had done all of this activity. And then if we got dropped back off at Rachel, Nevada, memory loss is a big piece of it, exactly. Both in marathons and abductions. So it's really hard to confirm or deny exactly what happened.
Who knows? And there's no photographic evidence. So
nope. No, it was really
midnight.
dark.
Yeah, it was a
midnight run.
Exactly. So did you though, was there any kind of aura other than the silliness? Obviously a lot of people were in on the silly aspects. Was there any kind of feeling that you had there that made you feel like you're in a different kind of place?
So I think if you're not used to a desolate highway, that alone is a interesting experience. So the extraterrestrial highway, it's a real highway for people that don't know. It's an active highway. The race requirement, we had to wear headlamps and reflective wear because there were cars coming. But another thing, again, for people who aren't familiar, when a race starts off, there was about 120 people. So you start off in a clump, but very quickly what happens is people spread out, right? Because everybody moves at different speeds and things like that. So very quickly, you're by yourself and down a highway in the desert, because, this is in Nevada. It is very dark, and the road was nice, right? Like, it was paved nicely, but especially like at midnight, probably till about 4 a.m. or so, I mean, it's pitch black. So there were a few times where we were coming up over hills. I was running with a friend of mine. I don't know that this would be a good race for someone to do by themselves, just for safety reasons. There were a couple of times where in the distance, or our headlamps would catch something, or we'd be running and we'd be kind of wondering, like, is that a hay bale or a cow or an alien? I mean, it could have been any of those things. So the tricks of the light did give us a lot to talk about.
And then I know there are stations along the way where there are helpers, people passing out water and things like that, and they probably come up out of nowhere, right? All of a sudden, there's somebody there.
Aid stations, they were positioned every 3.5 miles, and so you get quite used to that. Your body gets used. You kind of start to expect it, because that's where you get water and check in, and you also know what the race path is. So this particular race, the first 13 miles was an incline. So like, as you hit all of these markers, like, okay, good, I'm halfway up the incline. Okay, right after this, it levels out. And so you do pay a lot of attention to those aid stations and things like that. But we had several of them that they were right on top of us before we even saw them, because it was so pitch black.
Yep. Well, you can kind of see how people would see things in the dark like that then, and interpret them in whatever way possible. But I have another question for you. We have kind of a big investigative team here at That's Odd show. And I've been told by our team that you sometimes sell honey out of the trunk of your car. And I'm just wondering, can you confirm or deny that this is honey that actually produced on our planet, or is it from someplace outside of our solar system?
So yes, the honey itself is local, meaning of this particular planet. So that one has nothing. It's I've been told it's magical, but not extraterrestrial.
It's delicious, by the way. So okay, so just to kind of wrap it up, what are your personal thoughts? And maybe it's evolved over time for you, but what are your thoughts about the existence of whether life on other planets, or have they visited us, or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so it was really fun getting ready for this race, especially with my running partner, because Netflix had just a couple weeks before we left, had a big series that came out, and there's so much stuff out there of people sharing all these opinions. And I think she and I actually landed kind of in the same place, which was, it almost seems ridiculous to think it's not possible, right? Like it's how can you even think that we are the only beings in the universe? Right. That piece of it almost seems ridiculous to believe. But then you have the stories, of course, that you have to sift through, and the ones that you have to figure out of like, oh, which ones of these do we believe, which ones don't? I think of the stories, a good 85% of them can be explained either as being made up or misunderstanding, misconstrued, those kinds of things. But I think there's a solid 15% out there that there is something otherworldly interacting with us here.
I can relate to that. I would say about the same thing. And people say they must be true because everybody's story is kind of the same. But then you could argue, well, it's the same because they've heard other people's stories and now they're just kind of reenacting or repeating what they've heard. So it's kind of hard to nail that kind of thing down. But there are some that are so odd or so unexplainable in other ways that you have to think, what? So your opinion didn't change though, being so close to ground zero? Kind of?
It didn't change. I learned more. I heard more stories. I think the one area that always makes me a little sad is, I think there are people out there that get taken advantage of, or people that do dangerous things. I mean, the stories that we heard about people storming Area 51, that is no joke. It's
a military installation.
They will keep you from entering. Yeah. And there was, we had an Uber driver who was telling us the story. I hadn't heard the story about a group of people that gathered online, and they had thousands of people committed to coming to Area 51 and storming the gates. And then 15 people showed up. Because that's what people on the internet do, right? They say
Yeah.
that they're going to do it, and then like nobody came. But the people that actually did show up, I feel bad because I mean they were really looking around for the thousands of people that were going to storm the gates with them, and I'm like, oh, buddies, there's no one's coming. It's not going to happen.
But good for them that they didn't, because they would have been in a heap of trouble if they had continued. So
yeah, for sure. So that is the one kind of reminder piece of it, because we, instead of just looking at aliens, we really did learn more about Area 51 and all of the stories and the protections around it, and just how serious it is. Because the Area 51 run, that's the way we talk about it, but we were really only on the extraterrestrial highway. So Area 51 was in the distance, because it's in the mountains, and it was so we could see it on the horizon, like we knew kind of where it was, but there's no going into it.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for taking time to be with us and talk about this. This is a fascinating subject that will probably never end. We'll never have conclusive answers.
Nope.
So good to talk to you, Amy. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
She's fun, and she's got a sense of adventure and had a really good experience. So it makes me kind of want to go there and check it out, but probably not do the run part of it.
Probably not the run, but she is such a good sport, and I think she shared with us at least some good information and a couple of really cool pictures.
She was in the area. She was right there, where it happened. So I had another story. It happened actually 6 years before the whole Roswell thing began, and it was from Cape Girardeau, Missouri.
Oh, I like that story.
So you know it? Okay. Yeah. So a priest was asked to come to the site of a small airplane crash. They asked him to come up so he could give last rites for the victims of this. But when he got there, he said this was not a small airplane. It was some saucer-shaped, disc-shaped plane of some kind. He didn't know what to think of it. This was, by the way, back in 1941, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And the victims that were lying there on the ground were not human. And the way he described them is what we have come to kind of understand as the grays. They described with the very large eyes, the gray skin, kind of spindly arms, whatever. Apparently one was still alive. It was dying. One was deceased. He did administer last rites. They kind of whisked him away with the promise to never speak of it. He did apparently, though, write letters to his family about it, and those have been preserved. The family still has those letters. There was something about a photo that had been taken at the scene, but that's been long lost.
And there was a grave.
Oh, dear.
There was a grave.
Yes, right. And the markers are gone now. For a while, there were markers there, but if you go back to that site now, those markers have been long gone.
So there's no place to find, no way to exhume or do anything like that. That's fascinating.
That's a good one. Yep. So how about you? What else do you know?
That's a real good one. I have a story that ties into the story I just told earlier about Rendlesham Forest in a way, because it involves time. And Bruce Gernon, who is a man who is a pilot, he was flying a small plane in the Bermuda Triangle. He got into one of those electronic fogs you hear them talk about where his instruments go crazy. He was lost. He couldn't detach himself from it. And he sees this tunnel in the clouds. And he feels like that's his only way out. Just get out of this clouds and get into clear skies, see where he is. So he makes a beeline for that, and he does. He goes through that tunnel, through the clouds, and sure enough, down below is where he wants to be. And he flies down and he lands a full half hour before he could have conceivably landed for the capabilities of his plane. There was a time jump that cannot be explained. So there's some sort of a rip in time there that put him, and he's one of the few that came back.
I was going to say, he was at least one of the lucky ones.
Definitely very lucky, but it makes me think of, we saw a time jump at Rendlesham. We see this here. It makes me wonder if some of these rips and tears in the universe that go to other dimensions, our future, our not our past, maybe not, different places,
Right.
might be an explanation of why they're here now and gone the next instant.
You're right.
I'm fascinated.
Well, and there are some who are convinced that the aliens that we're seeing are really us from the future.
Yes.
Coming back to warn us, to help us, to guide us, and things
with
like
our
that.
more
So,
modern bodies, that's right. And and I wanted to, I interviewed Mr. Mike Rossberg, whom you know,
Sure.
and he is a good sport about this subject, but he also has some pretty strong opinions. So let's go visit with Mike and have a little fun with this. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you, Nadia. It's an honor to be on your show.
You know, we're having fun here. We're having a little fun with this subject of UFOs and even the potential possibility of aliens, which could be two completely different things. But I'd like to know what your take is on UFOs. And of course, have you ever actually seen one? I personally never have.
Well, there are kind of two ways to look at the phrase UFO, unidentified flying object. In a technical sense, if you look up at the sky and see something you just don't happen to know what it is, that would be an unidentified flying object. But in more common usage, I think the UFO abbreviation is used to mean aliens or flying saucers. Now, in my case, I've never seen a UFO because I always immediately understand which galaxy and which civilization that the aliens are from. So, so I've never really seen an unidentified flying object.
Well, you're probably ahead of the curve for most of us then.
Well, maybe, maybe not.
What do you see as, I hear people talking about so many sightings. And I guess I'd have to agree that a great many are misinterpreted or even, gosh forbid, hoaxed.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that?
Well, I think it is possible to have a photograph and not fully understand what it is. There was a fellow recently, a couple months ago on CNN, who took 3 of the most well-known UFO, quote unquote, photographs and kind of recreated them using scientific methods. And there are considerations such as relative distance between 2 different things, the effect that clouds can have on objects in the sky, or the effect that reflections can have. And so he took 3 of these photos and kind of through his own ingenuity, kind of recreated them with a very clear scientific explanation. So there is that. And there also, you know, there would be the possibility of not merely misinterpreting, but trying to fake something. Now, if it would be okay with you, I'd like to show you a photograph of a flying saucer in the air that I myself took fairly recently. Would it be okay if I showed that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We'll put it up now. Yes.
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I myself was outside, saw something flying through the air, and went in. And of course, as the rule is, I got my worst camera so that it would be the hardest to interpret. But I took a picture of this object in the air, and this is that photograph. So I think this in and of itself would be persuasive to some people that, you know, this is an object flying through the sky that looks like a disc. But in truth, this second photograph shows the origin of the disc and how it got up into the air. And I think proves nothing about the identity of the flying object, which is a matter of fact, can just sort of be seen on its own every once in a while.
Absolutely. That's very, very, very enlightening.
Okay, okay.
I've always wondered how people determine size and distance up there in the sky without any reference point.
Right, exactly. And that's where something that's actually small can look very big, or, you know, vice versa, depending on your relative distance to it. So yeah, that's one of those things that can be very confusing, and to somebody that doesn't have a scientific background, can be misinterpreted entirely. So relative distance can be a factor. Oh, Nadia, are you hearing, is some background noise happening? Are you hearing some background noise?
I hear that. I don't know what it is. It's not on my end.
Okay, well, it's like a sizzling sound. It's like something's cooking in a pot, but I can't tell what it is. I guess you could say that's an unidentified frying object. Dum-dum. Okay, well, got that one out of the way. Well, set that one aside. A UFO, we discovered a UFO here today.
All right. Well, I think we can safely say, Mike, that you would be considered a skeptic. Did I say that to you earlier or not?
Well, that is true. You know, my approach to many different questions is that there's a difference between having an interest in a question and a belief about the truth of a matter. If you have an interest in the question, it seems to me your personal commitment is to explore it and to try to derive certain truths and then base whatever beliefs grow out of those certain truths. And it's often a human characteristic not to do things that way. I mean, we merely look at our current political situation or other kinds of situations, let's say the COVID situation, and we have large swaths of people seeming to base their beliefs not on the facts, the scientifically established facts, but on what would make them feel the best about themselves. So I think it is a little bit of a human failing to find belief in certain things that cannot be established as being true and might very well not be if one looks at things scientifically. And I might just also mention a somewhat related matter, which is that humans in their philosophical outlook on things tend to look at things from their own point of view and not the point of view from, let us say, a space alien. So if one sees a flying saucer and one thinks, oh, that might be a space alien. Well, do you think a space alien would travel here from across the galaxy for perhaps hundreds, thousands, or conceivably even million years, and then just want to fly past like a cornfield in Idaho or something like that? Or would not the whole purpose of their mission be to learn about what other life forms there are on this earth? And therefore, in order to do that, they would present themselves. So, you know, they'd be so far beyond us that they could do that very easily and without frightening us or however they wish to do so. But I don't think that any sort of foreign alien extraterrestrial life form would travel all that time, all that distance, just to fly by and maybe wink once or twice in a flying saucer across the horizon in some vague part of the world, some desert or some cornfield or something like that. They would come to Earth and learn what they came here to find out. because they are seeking knowledge the same way we should be.
Well, and not only that, but over and over and over again, this
Yeah.
half-hearted visit does make one take pause. I'm so glad you're willing to have a little fun with this subject today.
Well, I like to try to have fun with most any subject, even though some aren't all that funny on their face. But
Well, as a skeptic and a non-believer, I think we can safely say that as from that point of view, what would it take? What would actually have to happen to move your needle over to, okay, maybe we're not alone in the universe. There might be some other beings or creatures, regardless of whether or not they've been here already or not. If they haven't, what would it take for you to go, whoa, okay?
well, that's a good question, and perhaps I need a two-part answer, which is that I think it's highly likely. It's 99.9% likely that there are other alien life forms. I think, the universe produced us, of that we can be certain. I doubt, therefore I am, so we know that we exist. But, and I would be fascinated to go to Jupiter satellite Europa, get underneath the ice and see if there are any alien life forms there. So I think it's undoubtedly likely that there's great amounts of life scattered here and there throughout the universe. The question is, of what is it capable? Is intergalactic or long distance, long time frames travel possible? On TV shows, one can go through warp speed 9 and get places very quickly, but in the real universe, is that possible? Now, do I believe that in the past 100 years that we've been able to take pictures and this and that various alien forms are scooting by, that I don't believe in. So to me, unidentified flying objects are literally that, unidentified flying objects. They're not aliens visiting the Earth. What they would have to do is indeed, drop down, get out of their thing and say, hello, we came to explore your universe, and so let's talk. We can understand English because we're way more intelligent than you are. So, indeed, they would have to present themselves.
And preferably on the White House lawn.
Well, yes, as opposed to, in Russia or China or something like that, yes.
Because the United States is the center of our universe.
Well, of our universe, yes. Yes, it is.
Mike, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your opinion with us today.
Well, thank you, Nadia. It was sure a lot of fun, as it always is, and congratulations on your show, which I think is terrific.
We're having fun with it. Thanks a lot.
Good.
Bye. Well, that
Thank
was
you.
a fun one.
Yep, Mike's very interesting. I always think of myself as like a curious skeptic. He's just a straight out skeptic. So. Although, no, he is curious as well, but I think he starts with a little harder skepticism than I do.
But the sense of humor, that puts it over the top for
Absolutely, yep, fun guy, so.
I have to tell you a story, don't I? It's my
Go
turn.
for it.
All right. Yeah, I have a story. I did not remember this story until we were talking about doing this show. In fact, only about a day ago did I remember this story as a viable sighting kind of story. And I was living in a condo at Sunnyside Marina in Stillwater, Minnesota, and the buildings, the deck faces east. And during the summertime, when you get those storm clouds and thunderheads coming across, they come out over our buildings and across the river and into Wisconsin, which is really fine. I love watching that, and you can sit in the lee of the storm and see those things. Well, this one day, I'm watching, and here comes this big the size of a building, the size of a truck, a huge, 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 huge thunderhead style cloud, but it looked like a human brain.
Wow.
It was shaped like a human brain, bumpy, lumpy. It had the brain stem coming out
Oh,
the
my
back,
goodness.
trailing behind, and lightning was inside it, firing off like synapses.
Uh-huh.
The whole thing was just like a moving brain across the river. The weird thing about it is,
There's more? That's weird enough.
The weird thing about it is it didn't dissolve or morph like clouds do.
Yeah.
It stayed brain.
Oh, odd.
And I couldn't help but thinking, is there a spaceship hiding in that, cloaking itself, hiding in that
Yeah.
as it goes across? I grabbed my movie camera, filmed it going across and disappearing, and then never saw the clip again, couldn't find it. I have no idea where it is.
That's
and
the mystery, too.
cannot prove my story.
Right. Perhaps you were abducted briefly and they took it from you. So that makes perfect sense. I was interested in another one. This happened just in 2004, so it's quite recent. And anybody can Google Tylenol capsule UFO, because that's how they described it. So it was military airmen out on a ship. Several of the pilots saw the same thing, and it was all caught on radar and video too. So it's out there; you can see it. But they described it as in the shape of a Tylenol capsule. That's how they described the shape, and that's how it pops up on YouTube and different places. They were watching this on radar for a long time, and in the videos that you see, you can hear the audio of these radar technologists saying things like, "Oh my God, did you see that?" You know, that kind of thing. And it's going 120 knots or whatever. You know, it was a surprising speed. And what was super crazy was that in the middle of the whole thing, this ship in the shape of a capsule spun and twisted and did it a couple of times. And they're saying, there's nothing that can do that. I've never seen anything like that. There is no technology that we have that could have done what that ship did, with that whatever it was did.
I was fascinated by that clip.
It really is crazy. And just the fact that they're stunned by it. You know, I'll be stunned by just about anything because I don't understand how those things work anyway. They know exactly what should and shouldn't happen.
And they
in
were
the
surprised.
skies. They were totally stunned, and it's carried a lot of weight since then. So that was fascinating. We did have another interesting interview with a guy named Randy Smith. He coincidentally is a friend of, or an acquaintance of Mike Rossberg, so there's a connection there. But he's also been kind of a lifelong skeptic. He's a retired lawyer, and so there's a certain kind of let's get to the fact versus fiction kind of mentality in attorneys and people of that ilk. But he has been thinking about this since he was a young boy, so he has a lot of thoughts too. So let's take a look at what he had to say.
Hi, Randy. Thanks so much for being with us on the show today. We are talking about UFOs. We've got believers, we've got non-believers, and we're curious to know where you stand because you have a little bit of a background of at least interest in it. What's your story?
Someone who's involved in putting together cable TV shows. Mike Rossberg is an old classmate of mine, and he and I actually did a science project called something like Flying Saucers Fact or Fiction or UFOs Fact or Fiction. So I did a fair amount of reading on it at the time.
Let me ask this then. Are you a believer? Where do you land on the spectrum of belief or not belief?
Well, I land pretty far toward the spectrum of not believing.
Okay.
As they say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So, I can't say that visitors from another planet are not flying around in our, atmosphere, because it's possible. Anything's possible. But generally, I'm not a believer.
Are you thinking that if there was such a thing, if they were visiting us, that we would, in fact, have some kind of evidence of it, like they would show themselves to us, or they would take over the continent or whatever?
Well, it's just, I guess, that the whole scenario of our being visited for a pretty long period of time, evidently, by visitors from another planet who have decided who've decided simply to observe us and not make contact with us. And it strikes me as being kind of improbable. And, you know, to be practical about what it would involve, I mean, the nearest star, I think, is Alpha Centauri, and I think it's 4 or 5 light years away. So really, what are the chances that some other, you know, civilization is sending out people who, at a minimum, would have to take 8 to 10 years to make the trip? That's assuming they're in the Alpha C system. So I don't know.
And
Generally,
if they go to all that trouble to make the trip, why are they just observing? Why don't they make more contact? That I can see.
exactly. I mean, I know I've read science fiction stories in which, you know, we're just being observed, but it would strike me that you know, if they're advanced enough technologically that they can send people over here in a you know, in a highly maneuverable spacecraft, that we wouldn't pose much of a threat to them. So if we don't pose a threat, it seems to me that there's no reason why they wouldn't try to get in contact with us. Maybe it wouldn't work. I mean, maybe it would be the equivalent of 2 people, you know, speaking, I don't know, Swabian and English, trying to talk to each other in the same room, but it seems to me they could appear and at least wave at us or something.
Well, and you can picture if we had the technology at this point to go and find another planet and we discovered some kind of creature, whatever, we wouldn't just observe. We would want to go down and interact in some manner to learn about them, learn what they're capable of and things like that. So you would assume maybe that would happen on the other side too.
Yeah, you would think. Now I could see that it on the other side, I can see that if we had the technology to get to another planet, we might be a little reluctant to just send somebody down until we really had sussed out what their technological capabilities were. But, you know, if they're observing us, I think they've been doing it for long enough that they know we're no threat to them. Now, I would think somebody from another planet might conclude, we don't want to have a lot to do with these Earth people. They're making war all the time.
Yep.
But still, why not make contact?
Well, and if some of the stories are true, some people say they've made contact with me because they sucked me up into their spaceship and explored my, you know, my bodily functions and things like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, I guess that's a form of contact, but it's not really designed to communicate with us. It's designed to, if it's happening, you know, obviously, designed to get more information about us.
Kind of the way we explore the animal world that way. You know, we may, you know,
right.
We might even so much as take them apart to see how, you know, this unusual animal works. So,
well, yeah, and we do. I mean, we dissect frogs and other animals,
right.
And heck, we even do it when they're alive sometimes. So yeah, that's and if they've done that to somebody, obviously that somebody's not reporting it back to us.
Right. Well, and you might have given another reason why they might not want to be in touch with us if we do that kind of thing to the creatures on our Earth. But, and yeah, like I said, warring and we're destroying the planet in many ways. So we may be unenviable partners for them. You know, they may not want to investigate us any further. I don't know.
Yeah, and that may be the case. It may be they have decided that there's no particular point in making contact with us, but they want to observe us to make sure that we're not developing some form of space travel that is that's highly maneuverable and can go long distances, blah blah blah, and has big weapons on it.
But thanks so much for being with us today, Randy. This was interesting, and we'll look forward to finding out more about UFOs and, well, let's go with Bigfoot and the whole gambit. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, this will be an interesting one for me to watch.
Thanks. All right. Take care.
Thanks.
All right, so another skeptic, but with some very interesting thoughts.
It was fun listening to him. I'm definitely not as skeptical as that,
Right.
but it's nice to get a balance of thoughts in here.
And since these are not hard and fast things we know, it's all conjecture, whatever. So I had another interesting one that I'd been thinking about, or just a concept, that if aliens, and it kind of comes back to something that Randy said, if aliens are here visiting, why haven't they peeked in on us? But the truth is, or I should say the truth, what I think is that if aliens are here now, they've probably been here a very long time. And in fact, there are a lot of ancient art type things, hieroglyphics and things like that, hundreds of renditions of these early cultures seeing something in the sky. It's often represented as some being coming from a flying craft. Now this goes back, hundreds, even thousands of years.
And they look like spacemen.
Right. Often they're depicted wearing almost like a spacesuit. And this is, of course, long before these cultures knew anything about
And in
space.
biblical paintings, you see those spacecraft in biblical paintings?
Right. A lot of them. So the idea is that if they're here now, they've probably also been here for a really long time, which makes me think it's okay, because if they've been here a long time, if they had in mind they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it a long time ago.
Yeah, we'd already be toast.
We'd be gone. So I think that's kind of an interesting thought that they've been here for a long time.
Yeah, that's very true. And I have just a short story here, a comment more than anything. Back in the 80s, I read the book Communion by Whitley Strieber. It was on the New York Times bestseller list, and it was widely popular and widely read. And it's a good book. It's a well-written book. And I was fascinated, and I'm a writer, so I think about things when I read these books, and the whole time he's saying how true this is and how his family is affected by it. There's just this niggling doubt in my mind, and I'm not sure when all is said and done, it wasn't just a fabricated story. I'm sorry, Whitley Strieber, but I doubt that one, and I can't tell you why I doubt that one. But it's good to have our personal thoughts and opinions. And
Right.
I interviewed a couple who, when I put the feelers out because up until this point in time, we didn't have any participants in this program who'd actually really seen a UFO for real, up close and personal. And someone answered me, and there are a couple of friends of mine. They are in the clergy, and I want you to hear what Pastors Sherman and Andrea Poston have to say. The whole thing speaks for itself. Well, hello, Sherman and Andrea.
Hi, Nadia.
Hello.
I understand you have a story to tell us. You've actually had a close encounter of some kind. I'm so excited to hear your story.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'll let Sherman
Cool.
tell it. Well, we were actually on our way from Belleville to East St. Louis. We were on 64, Highway 64, if a lot of people from my area familiar with 64. So we were on our way. We were between the O'Fallon exit and Fairview Heights exit. And so as we are, driving along off to the left, we see this huge Sherman can he probably can tell it best.
So she said a couple things that kind of caught my ear. She said, that the area around 64, and that's not to be confused with area 24 or whatever that the area, but
51.
area 51. That's it. Not to be confused with area 51.
No.
But we are people who we call ourselves, more like realists. We like sci-fi, but we don't look in the sky for
No.
UFOs.
No.
Having said that, we do know that UFOs that's what they are. They are UFOs, unidentified flying objects.
Yes.
So that's something that we couldn't identify. My wife, when she was saying that, she's using the terms Fairview Heights and Belleville, and those are from like Illinois, so you'll know the location because this is widely spoken of. And several people have seen what we saw. In fact, we were looking for quite a few days afterwards. We were looking for news clippings, anything that would verify that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, it was getting towards the evening. It was probably nighttime.
It was night.
It was nighttime, and we were driving down the highway. And at the time, I think I was in college, and I was in the art program, so I didn't leave. In fact, photography, advertising, design. I didn't go anywhere without my camera, and but I was a novice at it. And when we drove, you know how there's like a little hill going down towards the city or towards St. Louis area when you get to Fairview Heights, and there's a movie theater there. And over this movie theater, it was just all we could see was different lights. The only way we can explain it, it was like it looks like a city. This huge mass going across the sky, and it was full of lights, and it was just hovering right there. And I think I stopped the car right on the highway, and I was trying to film it, and it was just too dark. But it was so huge, it made the theater look small.
Yeah.
In comparison, when I say like a city, it was huge.
Like a floating city.
Yeah, like a floating city. And then all of a sudden, it just moved off, and it was gone. And we looked for, like I said, several days trying to get someone to
the news.
But you can look at the reports. I can't remember the exact year, but if you look up the UFOs in
it might have been like 87 or something like that.
Something like that, maybe even later than that. But if you look up the UFOs cited in Belleville,
I don't think we were married yet.
Belleville, Illinois.
Yeah,
Yes.
Belleville, Illinois,
Yes.
Cahokia, Illinois, even Granite City, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
All those people saw that, and even though we're by an Air Force base, they don't have a plane that big, that large, and that will move that slow.
So very much like the consensus that came out of that report a couple of months ago, it's not one of ours.
There you go.
Right.
Perfect.
Let me ask you a question, and I know that you have, Pastor Sherman, you've got both your feet planted on the ground, and also Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a question. I've heard people say, and you being associated with the clergy, and certainly a well-learned student of the Bible, I've heard people say that if we ever got the news or the information that would tell us that there actually are, and I don't think we'll see this in my lifetime, that there actually are other civilizations on other planets in our galaxy, that it would upset the clergy because it's not in the Bible. And my thought was, well, it's not in the Bible because the Bible's for us.
That's good.
What would be your comment on that?
Well, I think you had the best comment actually. We solely agree upon that, but
Yeah.
I would like to add to it and say that I've always said this, that if there were other beings, the Bible talks about different beings, but they talk about it from a supernatural standpoint, and they're always coming from the heavenlies and different things like that. And there's been fallen angels and demonic spirits and different things like that. Um, the Bible tells you no matter whatever is made, it says that at the end, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So it doesn't matter to me if there are other things out there, and maybe I haven't ran across the right scripture, but they are all subject to the same thing that we are. Every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess. Um, and like and like I said, I agree with you. The Bible said He came to save the world, so the Bible is written for us.
Amen.
Well, yes, the Bible, and the other thing is that I always fall back on is there are mysteries yet to be revealed that in the mind of God that we don't get to know until it's time to be revealed. So
Yeah, if you look in the Bible and you see things like the what they call the Ezekiel wheel, and I always call that God has a limousine, because it talks about talks about the angels, the seraphim, and how they're there, and then it talks about the throne of God being in the middle, and it talks about these four wheels and how the four wheels have eyes all over them, and every time God turns, if He turns, the wheels turn. So his vehicle moves this way and this way and goes this way and that way and wherever he wants to go. So I say it's God's limo. And then you have in the book of Revelation where you talk about the beast and how they have different forms and different, and it seemed to be natural. It doesn't frighten anybody, but behold, these beasts are there and different things like that. So there are mysteries that we don't know of yet, and but we will get to know.
well, thank you very much. That was very enlightening.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, what did you think about that?
Well, it was scary enough and honest enough that I think we needed to do a little preparation so they don't read our minds. And by they, I mean they.
Well, I read that when we think about tinfoil hats, aluminum foil hats, that this is supposed to be some kind of a goofy thing and kooks do it. Well, and maybe that's true.
Kooks.
But there is some truth to it because aluminum really does scramble radio waves.
Okay. And however, we don't know about the technology of these far advanced aliens. Maybe they can soak through it, but
Well, there is that.
we're going to just give it a shot and prevent them from really knowing what we think. So, UFO sightings have been in recorded history since as far back as the 1600s. So we don't really think that here in 2021 we're necessarily going to solve the entire thing, but we're giving it our shot and hoping for the best. We're hoping for a happy ending if and when they come to get us. So we hope you enjoyed this kind of odd, especially odd episode of That's Odd, and thanks for joining us.